All right, so we'll begin, and we'll all do our best to speak loudly and clearly. This does a pretty good job of picking us up, so that's nice. But we are beginning with Jeremiah 29. There was an introductory verse 1, but then it goes 4 through 18, which is the bulk of the message. And of course, we did read that in worship, and you could read that on your own at home if you haven't read it. So we'll talk about any themes from this that struck us, as well as it's also the first Sunday of Advent. So it's kind of an interesting pair of themes. So, yeah, what jumped out at you and struck you?
Well, you mentioned Advent. They're having to wait 70 years. We only have to wait 4 weeks, so that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
It's a long time to have to wait.
That's a long time. So imagine if someone said 70 to me, that would mean I'm never going to see my homeland. Well, none of us, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Theodore would be an old man going home to his homeland. So that's actually really significant when you think about that like, for some people that message was like, I'm never going to go home again. Mm-hmm. This is it. And how the grief they'd have to go through to acknowledge that, and just say, okay, well, it's not going to be me, but my grandchildren will get to go home to this land that was once so familiar to me. Yeah.
I mean, mentioned that. Mentioned Theo would be an old man. Mm-hmm. So it's not them going home, it's their children going home and their grandchildren. So it's going to be people who have never been there before.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Is it like going home anymore? Especially since they were told to get comfortable here.
Yeah.
So they're going to be displaced again.
Yeah.
And then the way they say it too, only when Babylon's 70 years are completed will I visit you. Really? So for the next 70 years, you're on your own, kids.
You know, this is interesting because in reading this, it says, the exile I have sent you into. And it's just really important to remember that this is how the Jewish people understood the world. There was only one power, and that was God. There was no, at this point in time, there was no devil, there was no demons, there was only God, and so everything came from God, and because God was just, there was a reason for everything. And that shifted. The New Testament is very different in its perspective. So when we look at this, if it makes us uncomfortable, that's okay. Because I think for a lot of us, when we see things happen, and you do have preachers that say, God gave us this disease to punish us for this, they're kind of working off of this theology, but it doesn't always hold water. We know that, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't hold water. They say, this earthquake is punishing us because women are wearing pants. Really?
Yeah.
You know, it just doesn't.
Or AIDS.
AIDS, exactly.
Huge.
Yeah.
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 But there is some level of reasonable, much of what they went through apparently was due to them listening to the wrong prophets, the prophets who were saying that, everything's going to be fine, everything's going to go your way, I'm only bringing good news, the news that you want to hear, and then this other voice, he's crazy, don't listen to him. But then it turns out that he was right, and you should have been listening to him, and you kind of turned your back on God, like listening to the wrong guy.
Yeah, and, you know, I feel like the parallel now is, look, there's some big issues in the world, and the faithful response is not to just pray and hope God will fix it, but rather wear masks, get vaccinated if you're eligible. It's just the same thing. Wear seatbelts.
Yep. Or a helmet if you're on a motorcycle.
Yeah. We have to take care of ourselves. So you got to sleep. You got to drink water. You got to eat. you know, there's so many things we do to make sure that we're taken care of. I'm not going to say, I'm going to stay awake for the next 40 days, keep awake, and God will take care of me. That's just not the way this world works.
It's not the way our bodies work.
not the
I
way
mean, it's
our
not the way
bodies
God's
work.
set up the whole system
Yeah.
to work.
Yeah.
I mean, you were talking about the community and how the animals are an important part of our community and our ecosystem, and how we as humans have not taken care of that ecosystem very well, especially as we have progressed so rapidly, and the rest of the world is straining to compensate for it as we've expanded into our forests and failed to, and we're just relearning how our forests actually work, with the way the trees actually communicate with each other, and
Yeah.
so on stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, there's a lot for us to learn and to be aware of, and the world is complicated and interconnected. And so for us to be faithful and to really listen for God, we have to listen to a lot of different voices. Sometimes it's nature that we listen to. Sometimes it's the poor and the immigrant, you know, and changes our...
I think it's wonderful that we're in a time of rethinking, and listen to the indigenous people and their, and seeing value where we didn't see value before. You know, when I was in school growing up, it was, you know, manifest destiny, and there was never a mention of the destruction we created to be on top, because we thought we were divinely directed to be on top. And it's wonderful now to see that, you know, we missed the mark. You know, obviously it was ego, and it was
big time.
power and superior weapons. I mean, and now we see value in what we tried to destroy. And it didn't succeed, but we can reverse. We can, you know, we have the chance to reverse our direction, and that's the blessing, I think.
Yeah. But the important part there is for those who have the power of the control of our society to have the strength to swallow the bitter pill of acknowledging our mistakes of the past, to own up to those mistakes and recognize that, we seriously screwed up in ripping the people of this land out of this land, and not listening to all the warnings that they gave us about how this land works.
Yes, I know. Yeah. I think we're beginning to listen now. And that's the best part.
It's going to take generations to really,
Well, I'm sure, and it will.
yeah.
Which, you know, brings us back to this, that whole 70 years.
70
Yep.
Yeah, we're not going to
years.
see the fruits of the work we're doing, but hopefully our grandchildren will.
Yeah, very good point.
It is a good point.
And what a faithful way to say, I'm going to seek the welfare of the place where I am, knowing that the benefits that will be reaped may not be something I see, but will be there for future generations. I just was reading in this book that I've mentioned several times, Braiding Sweetgrass, where the indigenous belief that she's talking about is you do something for the 7th generation. And then I was like, oh, that's the name of an organic cleaning company. And I was like, what do you think if like that's where they got it? You know? Oh, but it's such a beautiful idea that everything you do will benefit the 7th generation of your people, but now we're starting to say all people, because you can't benefit one to the exclusion of the other without there being some sort of repercussions that hurt. And we're learning that. We're learning that the hard way.
It's like it poisons the whole system if you
Yeah.
try to leave someone out.
That's right.
And I mean, they say it all the time, and it really is true that we are stronger together, that what may be perceived as a weakness or a fault of an individual or even a group of individuals, like I mean, people who are handicapped with poor eyesight or whatnot, those different perspectives are what help inspire our innovation to overcome those adversities or situations, and which then help us deal with other adversities later on. I mean, it's a major theme of many science fiction shows.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
we suddenly realize that we're not alone. Our people are, I mean, we're no longer the big dogs in the park.
Well, it's like if you compare a monoculture field of corn versus the Three Sisters planting method.
Yes.
You know, we've got diversity that's stronger.
Yeah.
Maybe more difficult to harvest, but
But
it's more robust.
Yeah.
And even genetically, they realize that when you have children with someone who's got genetic diversity, your children are healthier,
Yes.
which kind of went against the way some people were,
Oh,
in the
yeah.
Bible study we're
Yes.
reading.
Right.
You know, you wanted to marry in the tribe, and
Yes.
even in European history, you know, you marry your second or third cousin to keep the money and everything in the family, and
The kids-
power.
kids
Keep the
get
bloodline
along. Yeah.
strong.
Keep
Yes.
your bloodline strong, but we realize actually diversity is what makes
Yeah.
you healthy and strong, not purity.
Intermarriage.
Yeah, yeah.
Or a plate with your vegetables and your, as well as a little bit of meat and
Yeah, you should have a lot
a
of different
balanced
things on your
diet,
plate.
as opposed to
Yeah.
just eating meat and why to get with gout.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting that sometimes we have to learn the hard way that what we think it should be
Yeah.
is not actually just, you know.
That's what I think the whole, reap what you sow thing is. I think God tries to, sends us messengers and tries to put us in the right direction. But if we ignore all of that and we're, bound and determined to do it our way, as limited as that is, he'll say, okay, fine, you'll reap what you sow, but then after you feel the consequence of that, you may be calling out to me. You may be ready to listen. And
Yeah.
so it's not, you're doomed or you're damned, reap what you sow, but it's okay if you're going to be one of my kids who take the hard way to learn.
Yes.
That's fine. I'll just wait.
Yeah.
I'll.
He doesn't say, "Don't come crying to me."
Yes.
Right.
In fact, he begs you to come crying to him, but
Yes. If you run and
eventually.
break your leg, don't come.
But I think that's a really great point, and it's sort of in here too. It says, when you search for me, you'll find me. But I think that's so important, is that when bad things happen, it's not because God was punishing us. And even in the Bible, I often say we read things as being prescriptive rather than descriptive. Meaning, if trying to think of a good example, descriptive means God's describing it as it is. You are a rebellious child.
Yeah.
You're going to do things your own way, get hurt, and learn a hard way. That's not a curse. That's not God saying predestination. God's just naming,
This is what I see.
this is what I see. And oftentimes then we interpret that as God prescribing, saying, okay, predicting, this is the way I want it, or this is the way, you can't
Yeah.
not do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Or, okay, kids, you want to play at the gateway? I'll see you in another 70 years.
Yeah.
And we'll see how things look then.
And also in the Bible, when you think of the Israelites in the desert, in 8 days they made it to the promised land, and Joshua was saying, oh, great, there are giants in there, but what the heck? God is leading us. But the people said, oh no, can't do that. So God let them wander for 40 years until that generation was gone. I think that may be part of that. That's kind of what it reminded me of, is you're not ready ever, but your grandchildren will be. You know, so I'm not giving up on you or your future, your progeny, but face it, right now, you guys can't hear me. So
It's interesting to see that there are teenagers and people in their 20s who've invented literally earth-saving products.
Yes.
yeah,
You see these young people who are very aware of the reality that this planet could go in a way that won't sustain human life.
yes,
The planet will go on without us.
yes,
But we may not. And so they, you know, between discovering the thing that eats plastic and discovering completely compostable plastic and,
yes.
oh gosh, also, there's just so many things. And these are coming from young minds.
Yes.
And it's an interesting point of maybe this older generation that in some ways, you know, got us into this mess, or at least
We weren't aware.
wasn't
They didn't
aware,
know.
didn't.
It just seemed the riches of the land were so vast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You thought you'd never come to the end of it.
And the people who were aware there was an end or there was destruction were more motivated by their own profit. And so they kept the truth hidden.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think
True,
there was a
true.
lot of that. And now that we're much more aware, yeah, maybe it is these younger generations who are just say, okay, we'll get a handle on
We
it, we got to set this right, make business ethical again.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's an excellent point. I mean, that kind of makes me think of, you know, how the stereotype is for the I mean, when we were younger, the stereotype was the old folks having a hard time figuring out how to program their VCR. And now
Yeah.
that we're getting older, I mean, even Kirsten and I who are in technology, some of these new technologies are like, this works how again?
Wow, I
And
know.
but these younger kids were growing up with this stuff
It
around
can-
them,
It's
and
like they have it in their DNA. I'm just amazed.
Yeah.
or at least they've grown up in this hot pot of technology, such that they're acclimated to it and they're ready for the next level of the
Yes.
temperature of technology. And
Yeah.
we're trying to we're having a hard time keeping up with our own evolution as a
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
human
There you
race.
are.
Yeah.
There was an article in National Geographic, probably 5 years ago or so, about when you hit a certain age, between 17 and 25, you naturally become rebellious, wanting to, or not necessarily rebellious, but wanting to experiment, to get away from the family, start
Try it.
rejecting your parents more.
Yeah.
It's probably an instinctive built-in thing to get us to, move out.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But that gives you this perfect cusp of time when your mind will never be more open. And it's just amazing to watch kids in
That's
that
when
transition.
people are most, what am I trying to say? Idealistic.
Yes.
Yes.
Idealistic, the younger
They're
generation.
full of optimism.
Yes.
The interesting thing was that this guy found too was people think of people that age as being really risk takers and stupid and unaware of their
Yeah.
mortality. They're not.
Yeah.
He did some pretty extensive testing to prove that, yeah, they actually are fully aware of their mortality. In fact, even more so than a lot of other people.
Wow.
It's
Really?
not that they think they're immortal. It's
Yeah.
that they think it's worth it more.
Oh.
So it's the other side of the risk-benefit equation. They look at the benefits more and say, yeah, we're fully aware of the risk, but we think this is worth it.
Really? That's a great
They're just a little
insight.
more motivated.
Yeah.
Then when you get older, you start looking more at the risk and go,
Well, and you're in the system.
yeah,
You're working for companies who are good, bad, or indifferent on many levels. And you're worried about your retirement. And, so
Yeah.
so a lot of that takes over. And providing homes for your children,
well, you
stable
have
environment.
to be looking at now, I need to create a stable
It's a different,
situation.
just a different focus,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Because that's your childbearing age, is when you're
Yeah.
raising a family.
yeah.
It's also nice Because I remember when I was younger, I mean, I'm still idealistic in some ways, but that's part of my makeup. And it's good to have somebody in the mix who is.
Yes.
I don't stay cynical for very long. Give me an hour and I'm back. And that's good to have that around. But I do remember being younger and just, there was a freedom from this is the way the world works, where your imagination is really wide open. And actually you can then do things, because we do tell ourselves story. We do, as we get older, see enough failures and enough of this and that sometimes our imagination can clamp down and we're like, well, it doesn't work that way. Well, when you're younger, because you don't know it doesn't work that way, you can actually make things happen
That will work.
Yeah.
that will work and surprise people and surprise yourself, because haven't bought yet into
Right.
this is the way it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For security.
No one told
or
you
for
when you were supposed to do
success.
that, so you went out and did it.
Exactly.
No one said it doesn't work, so you went and did it.
They said that they told you it doesn't work that way, and you were like, well, let's prove it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a gift, and that's why intergenerations, churches can be that way. When you do have people of all the generations talking and sharing their hopes and dreams, you can get quite a mix of not just perspectives, but the young passion,
innovation.
innovation unbounded by the way it is. And then you can get some of that wisdom of people who've lived their life, who can maybe help
Yeah.
rudder some of it. Yeah.
We tried that when we were young. It didn't quite work, but if you do it this way, and
Sure.
that can help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even just the first half of that. We know that this part doesn't work.
Right.
Do you have any other ideas on how to attack this?
Yeah.
There you go.
Because
That's
that's,
good.
if we had
That'll
thought of
save you
the,
time.
this might work, then we probably would have already tried it.
Right.
Yeah.
But if we can at least say, here are all the things we tried. What else you got?
Yeah.
Very good.
Oh, so we use this new material for that, and then it does work. Now the bumblebee flies.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very good.
I remember when I first came here and I was starting to meet, we do monthly meetings with the Bloomington pastors. And, I came kind of rearing out of the gates, and the call committee had been like, yeah, we want change and everything. And I was like, great. But then, of course, there's, it takes time to build trust and to get to know each other. And I remember sort of trying to share some of the frustration or confusion I was feeling. And an older pastor said, 5 years. I was like, that seems like such a long time.
Yeah.
But he said, 5 years, you need to build a foundation of trust so that you know each other and also you understand the good intentions that you have. And then,
Well, that's good.
then you can move. And I thought that was really wise.
Yeah.
Came from experience.
Yeah.
Invest in the welfare, right? Invest in the welfare, and then you can reap some of those benefits.
Also, it's a very hopeful thing. It
Yeah.
will come. Don't,
Yes.
don't
Yeah.
get discouraged.
Right.
Yes.
It will come.
Yeah. They didn't jump up and change direction after your very first sermon. Shocker. Right? But yeah. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need each other's perspectives.
Yes.
We do.
Yeah.
I thought of another thing about this.
Mm-hmm.
So 70 years, they say it takes 3 generations for an immigrant to settle in, because the first generation are just immigrants. The second generation, their children don't really fit in either culture. The third one fits in the new culture.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
So you were talking about us being descriptive rather than prescriptive, but and also the ancient Jews having real idea of there being just one God and everything comes from God. So there's no devil doing some of it or any of that.
Right.
So if God sent them into this exile for them to grow and develop and cross-pollinate a little bit,
Yeah.
hence the encouragement to go marry them, let your kids marry them, and
Yep.
all that, and then you'll go back. You'll
Yep.
3 generations to create a richer, more interesting population.
I hadn't
That's-
thought of that.
yeah.
Hadn't thought of that at all.
And then they come back with some new, fresh ideas. It was during this time that a vast majority of the Old Testament was written down. And some of those ideas have Babylonian undertones from their stories and
Yeah.
things. So you definitely where you live and the culture you're in affects the way you see things and tell your stories. The 2 creation stories that we have, the first one that's very familiar, they call that it's the order from chaos, right? It starts with water. Everything's just this watery mass, and over 6 days God creates order. The second one's the dry creation story, where it starts out like a desert, and then in one day God brings forth life, including Adam and the animals last, and then Eve. Those 2 stories came from the separation of the groups. And the Babylonian had more of, I'm trying to remember all of this details, but there was an area in which the people lived that flooded a lot.
Yeah.
And so this idea that creation comes from the watery chaos was very different from people who are living in pure desert, where they want life to spring forth.
Yes.
So there you go.
Yeah.
You look around and then you find meaning. What's meaningful to you
Yes.
is going to be a little different from what's meaningful to someone
Someone in
else.
Arizona.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
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 I know there's a group of people living in that part of the world today called the Marsh Arabs that live in Iraq, in the watery parts of, I can't remember which river, it's probably the Tigris, but it's a floodplain that's,
Yeah.
they got these, I saw pictures, elaborate mosque that have been made out of reeds, and it floated.
Oh,
Ooh.
wow.
It's a very small subculture now, because
Yeah.
it's, the kids want to move out and
Right, yeah, yeah.
go have
Try their
electricity and
own.
things like that,
Little things.
Kids.
which I
Yeah.
imagine is difficult on a floating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now we can put some solar cells on that thing.
Yeah, well, they probably do have that sort of thing, but
Yeah. That's interesting. Well, it's an interesting conversation to kind of wrap it up. It's neat that you pulled out that 70 years, that generational
Yeah.
sense.
I wouldn't have thought of it.
And as we relate that to our own lives and hope that, yeah, we have 70 years ahead of us in which our
Definitely.
generations can heal and find hope and seek the welfare of the whole ecosystem so that we come out of this in a new, better place.
Yes.
Where, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Nice. Well, thank you. And
welcome.
yeah, have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. We've got 2 more Sundays of adult forums, and then it's the Christmas play, which we'll be getting scripts out soon.
Okay.
And then Christmas coming
Exciting.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.